We have been getting a lot of requests for VPAT services lately, and I know a lot of clients are still trying to figure out exactly what this documentation is. So let's go ahead and look at some examples of what are really ACRs. So one distinction before we begin, the VPAT itself is just a templated document that you fill in and complete. Once you have this document completed, it becomes an accessibility conformance report. The two terms are used interchangeably in the marketplace, but really it's an ACR that you're looking for. So here, an example of an ACR, but it's created using a VPAT. All right, so with that said, we are going to look at a post on accessible.org, and then I'm going to tab through or go through different tabs where I have resources available. The first resource is the Google Accessibility Conformance Reports page on Google itself. So it's on about.google. I will link to this. Here we can find ACRs for all sorts of Google products and services. So we have Google Calendar on here, we have Google Chrome browser, we have Google Docs, and the list goes on and on. So just going back here, we see that Google has ACRs for all of these different things, and we're going to look at the ACR for Google Calendar. So when we go and we look at this ACR, we can see that we have all of this detailed information that is filled out to start with. And that is how ACRs begin, is we have the details surrounding the product or service in question. So here we have the name, product version, Google Calendar, report date, product description, contact information if you have any questions, evaluation methods used, applicable standards/guidelines, and all of this information is populated. And when we scroll down, we have here a table of contents. We have the pages tested. This information is added to the ACR. And then we get to the actual table. And so this is where we start to look at the criteria of the technical standards used. And this criteria, for this criteria, we have a conformance level and then a remarks and explanations column. So here I'm just scrolling through. This is the actual accessibility part of the ACR. And what you'll notice here is we've gone through several criteria where it's a partially support. So it supports up to a point, and then it is non-conformant. And then we have an explanation here in the remarks and explanations column. So what this tells you is that it's not all products and services are fully conformant with a technical standard. So keep that in mind. Just because there may be technical accessibility issues, it doesn't mean that the product or service is wholly inaccessible. But here, we're just scrolling down, and I'm going to stop just because we've gone through several criteria. We've seen partially supports and supports as the conformance level. Here we have a not applicable. But this just gives you an idea of what the finished product looks like, or the finished report looks like for an ACR. Now, one thing to note is that they formatted this a little bit different. One thing that you'll note is that this is in portrait orientation as opposed to landscape. And so we'll get to landscape in a moment, but going back to the blog post, and by the way, I will link to this post in the description. This is just a write-up really that corresponds with this video on examples of VPATs and ACRs. But then scroll down and we'll get to the actual template here. So remember, I talked about the VPAT itself is just a template. And here in the post, we have a screenshot of the template. And you can tell that visually this looks different, right? But the information stays the same. So even if the formatting or the styling is slightly changed, as long as the information is there, that's really the important part. So we can see here, we have company accessibility conformance report. So in the company brackets, we'd put in the company. This is the international edition of the VPAT. So note that there are different editions of VPATs. And scrolling up further, in the previous ACR we looked at it, again, it was the international edition. Again, this is the international edition. This is going to include multiple technical standards. just note that there are different editions of the VPAT. Another edition is the WCAG edition. So here we're looking, and we have these different prompts for the name of the product and or version of the product, report date, so the date the report was created, and then we have product description, contact information, etc. So that's the template itself. And we're just going to scroll down, and we're going to look at another example. This time it's the NIH Workplace Equity and Diversity Survey, ACR. So here we look at the ACR, and one thing we can note right away, one, this is the revised Section 508 edition. So we have a different edition of the VPAT, but they left in the instructions. So when you issue an ACR, the instructions are supposed to be removed and discarded and just leave you with the accessibility conformance report. So this may have been created in-house. This may have been issued by a vendor who didn't know that. But either way, we have here the instructions. So they left in the instructions. The instructions are included in the the VPAT. But again, we are supposed to discard these. But we're just going to scroll down, scroll past them. It's not anything that can't be overcome. It's just a few extra pages of instructions. And what's funny is we are on page 8 right now. It says, posting the final document. When publishing your accessibility conformance report, be sure to remove the entire first 9 pages of this document, including the table of contents, introductory information, and instructions. So, this is why you need to read these instructions. But again, we get to the accessibility conformance report, and we get to the point eventually. And so you can see here that there's really not any formatting or styling added to the template. But what you do see is it looks like the prompts are really headings, right? So, and then we have the information filled in for the prompt here for the name and product version. Again, it's the NIH Workplace Equity and Diversity Survey, but it looks like it's in that same heading. So I don't know if this is how they've styled this, but the point here is just that we have the information, it's there. The report date, they've got this in a different font. But again, this is not anything that's going to change what the material report is. So it's going to be okay, regardless of how you filled it in. It's just sometimes that the styling looks nicer. Going back, we see this going back and tabbing back to this Google Accessibility Conformance Report. It was very, very nicely styled. Everything was very neat, although they did make their own adaptations right from the template itself, but that's okay. And so just looking through this, we have all of the information filled out. Scrolling down, though, you will notice right now that we are in landscape mode and not portrait. And landscape mode is actually or landscape orientation is actually what the VPAT is by default, right? Like when you download the VPAT, it is in landscape mode. So if you want to fill it out directly, that's what it will be in. And we just scroll down, and we have the table 1. So with the table, again, here's where we get to the actual accessibility of the product or service. So here we have criteria, we have the conformance level. Here, if we look down a few success criteria lower, we have a partial supports on 1.3.1. And then we have remarks and explanations on every row for the column. And that's just to start off with. So that's good that they've added those remarks and explanations in. But then when we look at the terms, the terms here aren't matching up because we have a partial supports. And then I'm just going to scroll back. I just scrolled to it. Terms partially supports. So, not a big deal here, but we are noticing a few details are not completely aligned. But again, it's, nothing's going to be lost here. We know what partial supports is getting at. It means partially supports, but these are some examples. And when you look at different ACRs, you will come across, various inconsistencies. But again, the most important thing is that we have a report that is accurate. It's filled in correctly. It's presented correctly. The material information is all there. The details, the pertinent details are all there. They are accurate. And we also want to make sure that the version is the latest version that we are looking at. So what I'm getting at here is that there's like, let's say there's a software version, and that we're not working for we're not filling in a VPAT for an outdated version of the product when the current version is going to be the version that is featured on the website. So you want to make sure that everything is aligned and matched. And that's really what's important here. We want the ACR to accurately reflect whatever the accessibility status of the actual product or service in question. So just looking through these examples, now you have a much better understanding of what this documentation is and what kind of information is included in it. The point of this documentation is so that buyers and procurement agents have an easy way to assess the accessibility of a product or service. And along with that, they can easily compare the accessibility of competing products that are trying to win the contract or trying to be, the company is trying to get the product purchased. So that's what's in play here. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into when you're going through the process and you're trying to determine when you're going through the process of getting VPAT services. There's a lot more that goes into it, but we've covered a significant amount in this video. If you need help with filling in a VPAT and completing an ACR, then feel free to reach out to me. I will include information in the description on how to reach me at accessible.org. We have a lot of clients that are asking for VPAT services. So this is something we're going through a lot. We can help you determine what edition will work best for your organization. And then we can also provide the audit, which the audit is going to supply the information it's going to supply the material accessibility information that is going to be used to fill in the accessibility table for the VPAT. So if you need help with VPAT services, we could definitely help you. I will include more information for pricing and expectations from accessible.org. I will include that information in the description.